7P, approving ground lease between the City of Grand Island and Hall County Livestock Improvement Authority, Fonner Park. Mr. Kurtz.
He's just the audio guy,
just
or the TV guy.
Mrs. McAloon.
Maybe. Is that the right word?
So, Council, we have before you tonight a recommendation to approve a ground lease between the City of Grand Island and Hall County Livestock Improvement Authority, also known as Fonner Park. This agreement came about as a result of conversations and efforts to extend our partnership with Fonner Park, as we own the Heartland Event Center, we've got the Field House, Island Oasis, all of those things in close proximity to Fonner Park's operations, and for the Event Center and the Field House, both on Fonner Park's campus. So Fonner Park, the campus-wide, we've had stakeholder meetings with all of the occupants, State Fair, Fonner Park, the city, and now the casino as well, Elite Casinos. During those stakeholder meetings, one of the issues that came up that we felt we needed to help resolve is that when the casino submitted its construction plans to the city, it included a parking garage. During their construction process, that parking garage was actually eliminated. So our building official reached out to the contractor to find out how are you going to satisfy the parking requirements for the hotel and casino. And their belief and hope had been that the existing parking on the Fonner Park campus would satisfy that. Once the building official did an inventory of the actual paved spots, and that's what you have to count, they were about 1,100 spaces short of what was needed. Because if you think about it, there's a lot of activity there. It's not common that all of those activities are going on at once, and frankly, the 1,100 number takes that into account. But they still needed to be able to provide parking for 1,100 vehicles. So during those stakeholder meetings, we pulled up this image and looked at how the city could help partner with Fonner Park to solve this issue for them. So what we are recommending to the City Council tonight is this ground lease that will authorize Fonner Park to construct approximately 1,100 parking stalls on the city-owned property that is north of State Fair Boulevard. As you know, there is a law enforcement memorial there. In, I believe it was 2006 and 7, City Council at that time had also dedicated the southeast corner of the city property to both a law enforcement memorial and a firefighters memorial. The law enforcement memorial has been built. The firefighters are still fundraising to build their side of it. So these parking plans, we met with the firefighters, the IAFF representatives that are handling the fundraising, and they said this was essentially their original plan minus parking. They were going to have to pay to pave parking, but we can still fit it in there and provide ADA access, handicap parking. In addition, the one of the terms that we said we as staff were willing to go forward with this only if they also provided an ADA accessible path from this new parking lot to the field house. Because even though the city has specifically 200 spaces in front of the field house on the east side of it for its parking, we know that in all likelihood that space can get bumped out by patrons going to the hotel, going to an event at the event center, going to the casino. So we wanted to make sure that we weren't harming the access of Fieldhouse patrons in any way. So this is the design that Olson Engineering came up with. As you can see, it preserves the space for the firefighters memorial. It tucks the parking about as close as we can get to Island Oasis and still accommodate the future expansion plans for Island Oasis. That green area to the left side of the Island Oasis area is what the consultants proposed as future miniature golf to extend the season and the revenue that can be generated by Island Oasis. So this parking plan leaves space for that. It also takes the fence that is currently maybe halfway between the law enforcement memorial and the station right now, and it moves it back up closer to the perimeter of the fire station. Chief Schmitz is the one who established how close that fence could be and what they needed. It was originally planned and fenced in that it was going to be a training center, but that's not something that we believe is intended to be built there now. That area up at the top that provides the ADA access to the field house, it would also be, I guess, plumbed and wired for the carnival trailers that are also being displaced by the casino project. So the connections would be put in place during this construction to facilitate the state fair's use of this. So it's really what we think is a win-win for all of the campus stakeholders, and helps the casino stay on track to be able to get a temporary certificate of occupancy if the council approves this ground lease. Then our building official would, once all of the inspections have been done, and they're very close to completion, then he would issue a temporary construction or temporary certificate of occupancy that would require construction of this parking plot area paved, fully complete by August 15th of next year, 2026, which would, yes, we're in 2025, which enables them to do planning work this year, and there's no way they could construct it before the fair, before the state fair. So we certainly didn't want to interrupt that. So we are recommending that we give them an additional construction season. Actually, they anticipate that construction, the grading and things like that would start happening around or shortly after September 15th of this year. So they do what work they could get done this fall and then finish the construction next spring and summer to be fully operational by the time the state fair starts. So that's our proposal. Our staff's recommendation is that you approve the ground lease with Fonner Park to allow the paving of this overflow parking area. One point I do want to make sure I say is that this is public parking. This is not exclusive to the casino. This is not exclusive to Fonner Park. This is simply a partnership that it would be a 75-year lease, and the parking would, because it continues to be city-owned, the parking would continue to be public parking available to any member of the public.
Mr. Vavricek?
So that's the presentation, right? Well, I'm critical of this suggestion, and I've got a suggestion, hopefully that's a better opportunity for a win-win, because this is not a win-win for all stakeholders. If this is approved, this is impairs the Nebraska State Fair. It impairs the Nebraska State Fair to potentially grow, because this ground is the only ground on the entire campus that's outside of Fonner Park control. It doesn't have the ability to go ahead and grow or put on a building in any other place without the approval of Fonner Park. As long as the city owns this ground, there is that potential opportunity. And once this decision is made for the next 50 years of paving, then there's no improvements whatsoever that can ever be on this ground based on that agreement, unless Fonner and the city of Grand Island both agree. So when I look at this lease, and I think, number one, no disrespect, but to have this far-reaching 50-year decision has many far-ranging impacts, many unintended impacts on a consent agenda, I think also speaks loud the fact that I guess everyone assumed it was going to be approved, because I don't see Fonner here and I don't see casino here. So I'm not trying to be contrary, but I am trying to point out the importance of this decision, because when I look through this lease, once again, I don't know the number of acres even that's been designated here. So I've got certain questions, and like any citizen that comes forward and asks a question publicly, I think it behooves an answer. But how many acres is designated on this? I don't know. I'm assuming parking stalls are 10 foot by 18, but I don't know. But when I look at this, I mean, let's just call a spade a spade. And your presentation was correct, Laura, in that this came about because the casino came here. They were going to have a parking ramp, and for whatever reason, of course, Fonner and the casino were partners, so I don't know what went on, but ultimately, the casino decided not to go ahead and have a parking ramp. So now, after all these months of time, the casino's building, it's getting ready to ramp up, and now there's an issue, there's not enough parking stalls, that needs 1,100 parking stalls, according to the building department's directive. Okay, so I would just say, what's needed here is flexibility, and I don't see any vision in this lease agreement that's before you. And at the conclusion of this, and I know Mr. Nickerson asked for discussion, I figured there'd be maybe more of a presentation than what has occurred. But if you even have 1 ounce or 1% doubt that this is the right thing, don't approve it tonight. The worst thing we could do is to do that, in my opinion. And let me also state this. I'm speaking on behalf of, as a citizen, with my First Amendment rights, not on behalf of any other board or commission. But if you have just 1% of doubt, let's go ahead. There's nothing harmed by going to a study session. And that's an option that's in front of you each and every night. Even if you believe me just by 1%, and trust my word, let's go to a study session. So indeed, everyone can be there, but once again, it's a delicate relationship, and I don't really like talking in front of people when they aren't here. I figured Fonner would be here and the casino would be here, but they're not. So the solution is, in my opinion, the State Fair needs some ability to grow. 50 years from now, 2074, can you think back, what did that campus, the Fonner Park campus, look like in 1974? A grandstand and horse barns, period, right? Everything else was vacant. Now, think 50 years from now, this decision would prevent potentially another hotel from coming there, private development, more State Fair buildings. I mean, any number of different things. But once you lock this in, the only way you can break it is by the joint agreement of both parties. And in the agreement under item 39, it even says this cannot be modified except without the signatures of both parties. So in essence, this is really not about, in my estimation, parking stalls. The casino needs it, okay? Then why doesn't the city retain the ground? Because this asset is a multi-gazillion-dollar asset the taxpayers have. And you're making a potential decision for the next 50 years on their behalf. But this is locked into the biggest, highest, largest destination-driven campus in our community. And to think what it can be 50 years from now or 5 years from now, but let alone the State Fair's ability, if they wanted to have a building, where would they go? Okay? That's why the flexibility of the city owning the ground means a lot. We need the flexibility to accommodate future needs in the future, in my opinion. When I look at the comments based on the presentation, just for clarification, it's my understanding that the State Fair is not going to be doing stormwater drainage improvements with the ARPA money on the city ground. Those investments are going to be levied on the ground elsewhere on the Fonner campus. Also, when I look at what's provided in it, it talks about maximize the available stormwater remediation funding and create over 1,100 additional. That's not the case. The State Fair can go ahead and exist without the paving, just like it has the last 15 years. but the casino needs this. So what I would just suggest, and I could go on, but ultimately I would just ask, what's the harm in delaying the decision by going to a study session and really, once and for all, really make sure, is this the best approach? Why couldn't the city retain ownership, Mr. Mayor, and council members alike, and have the improvements funded by the casino and have them funded by Fonner? This lease is with Fonner. It also indicates you can't go ahead and secure a loan by any other lender and so forth to pay for the funds. You have to have the wherewithal to do it. Well, it doesn't indicate, if you have the wherewithal with other potential partners, maybe you can fund it. But I think the casino could fund this, or Fonner. And the city could go ahead with an annual agreement for rent of $1 a year. But otherwise, I'm just saying there needs to be some flexibility for the state fair to approach the city and say, hey, we'd like to go ahead and have a facility there and grow. Because where will the state fair be in 10 years if it can't grow? Where will it be in 20 years? It will morph. It'll continue to go ahead and try to do more on fewer buildings and less people and higher costs. So once again, I appreciate the fact that Mr. Nickerson pulled this. I was going to ask, not knowing if anyone would, but I appreciate the opportunity to draw the attention to this. And let's just take a pause. This is a 50-year plus agreement of some of the most highest priced real estate that might offer the most opportunities. But once you pave it, no. Laura, did I misspeak in any way or not?
Fonner Park is paying for the improvements. This is a ground lease to them. Once the improvements are constructed, they will become the property of the city, which is why it remains as a public parking lot. So the benefit to the city from this lease is the improvements that are made on its property at no cost to the city or taxpayers. And the state fair was actually part of the discussion to come up with this idea, and has provided every indication that they support it because they would like to have that parking lot paved. They're also paying, they will continue to do the work that was going to be funded with ARPA.
Right.
That just reduces the amount that Fonner has to pay. And then we're not privy to the terms between Fonner and the casino.
Right.
But I would assume that Fonner and the casino have an agreement on who pays for that parking.
And pardon me, I find it difficult to hear, particularly female words sometimes, so if I didn't exactly understand you, I'm sorry. But if I'm the casino, I'm loving this deal, because I go ahead and get 1,100 parking stalls and it's dedicated, but it doesn't provide any allowance or flexibility for anyone else to use that ground. And the reason I brought up the number of acres, the best I know, an acre is roughly 43,000 square feet, and it'll go ahead and accommodate 150 parking stalls. So when I do the math, okay, that means you need 7.5 acres of ground for 1,100 parking stalls. I don't know the amount of acres here. If it would allow then the ability to have other structures on it in conjunction, or if indeed 1,100 stalls is using more than 7.5 acres. But that's kind of the benchmark, and I didn't see it in the presentation to know the size or the number of acres. And so I just say, if there's enough questions raised, I would just once again ask for leadership to say, let's take a pause and have a study session and really make sure this is the right approach that we want to live with for the next 50 years. Thank you for your leadership.
And just on the acres, we don't have, Olson has not completed the legal, but I know they had an approximate number, didn't they, Keith? Yeah, he's going to measure it for us now. The 1,100 stalls was arrived at as what additional amount of parking is needed for the entire Fonner Park campus to accommodate the casino's use. And there is an agreement, a lease between Fonner and the casino, that it's my understanding Fonner is required to provide parking for them. So this was a way that we could help Fonner meet its obligations to the casino and provide an improvement that the state fair supported.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Yep. Probably about 10 acres-ish.
Thank you, council members. You've heard competing ideas regarding Resolution 2025-67. Would entertain a motion. Mr. Pollock?
I would make a motion to bring this back, and not the next council meeting, but the one after that in March. I would like to see what the estimated cost is going to be for us, for the casino. I know why the casino is not building a parking garage. From what I understand, the cost was about $20 million. Am I right, Laura? Is that?
I don't know.
That's the number I'd heard passed around. So I don't know if that's right or not, but
That's not, they never filed a building permit for it, so I couldn't tell you.
I think that's because it's going to cost too much. But I would like to bring this back.
Thank you, Mr. Pollock. Mr. Stell?
I second the motion, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Any discussion? Mr. Nickerson?
I asked this to be pulled mainly because this is it was a pretty big project. To former Mayor Vavricek's point, it was a lot of information just to be tucked into a consent agenda. So I thought it was something worth talking about. I appreciate Laura elaborating much more than I got out of the packet, because you can just do it better that way when someone's explaining a lot of this to you. It is a lot of land. It's a lot of concrete that remains concrete. I appreciate the points that you bring about what is the best fit. But at the same time, I'm not sure what we accomplish if we come back a month from now. If all the stakeholders were there, including Nebraska State Fair, and they all said that we're okay with this, I don't know what's going to change between now and then. Maybe it's just a good thing for discussion, but the stakeholders were there, and people that had a vested interest in the future of this land, potential growth, said we're okay with what we've got. I hate personally seeing that much concrete sitting there, concrete most of the time. It does bother me to see that much land, but I also know that when the state fair is in session, every one of those parking stalls will be appreciated, I'm sure, and especially on those rainy days. We'll be glad to have something that's hard surfaced. My question that I do have, though, as we decide whether we want to move this a month from now or whenever, are there any deadlines that the casino has to meet in order to accomplish what they want with their occupancy? Do we know, is there a deadline? Because they want to be up and operating within the next probably quarter, I would imagine.
They cannot open without 1,100 parking stalls provided for. So if they finish construction, they will not be able to open until such time as they have either this agreement or some other arrangement to provide that level of parking.
And we know that a garage would be out of the question, and because that's probably another year or more to come together. So we know that's not going to happen under the circumstances. So I think the timing of this, a lot of work's gone into this. I think if you don't believe that, just listening to Laura, I thought, holy cow, there was a lot of people involved in this and a lot of discussion. You've got the firefighters memorial people involved. You've got the fire station involved. You've got Island Oasis factored in. You've got all of these different components that's come to a conclusion. And while I'm not crazy about seeing that much concrete, that may not be a terrible idea. On the flip side of that, I was pretty impressed that we have 1,100 parking spaces. The other thing I was impressed with is that it would be concrete and that we don't have to walk through the mud in all those 1 and 2 inch rainstorms that we have. So I think I'm not sure what we're going to gain in 2 weeks or 4 weeks, and I guess I would just entertain any other discussion from council members as we look at this. What might we gain, and what's going to happen to the casino if we postpone this a month? I would imagine, we're in February now, almost March, and I would almost bet that they would like to have that thing open by June, no later than June. And although I'm by there 2 or 3 times a week, I can't imagine that's going to be completed by June, but I have no idea what's going on behind the scenes there. But guess what are we going to gain in a month? That will be one of my questions.
Mr. Still.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I too agree with Jay Vavricek that there's been a lot of rush, and I don't know if we're doing it the right way. I don't know how much space is available. I'd like to have us look at a parking garage if we need the space for barns and that for the state fair. There's just a lot of questions I have. I've also heard last weekend from a worker at the casino that they were planning on opening in 30 days. That's what he said. So that's just hearsay or rumor or his opinion. But I just feel like we need to do it the right way, and I don't know if this is the right way or not. Thank you.
Mr. Sheard.
Thank you. Laura, question for you, I guess. You said you sat down with all parties. Who all did that include?
Fonner Park, Elite Casino, Nebraska State Fair, the campus stakeholder meetings. We have Todd McCoy attend on behalf of Parks. As noted, we met with IAFF about the Firefighters Memorial and Chief Schmidt. And then also Venue Works has started participating in the campus stakeholder meetings, and so they've seen this concept too.
To Mr. Vavricek's point that the fair might want this ground, and you said that they were for this. Speak to that a little bit. In what way were they for it, or how did they express that?
So the stakeholder meetings are actually chaired by Mrs. Park, who manages the state fair. She brought up the topic of what will we do about parking at the casino's request and at Fonner Park's request at the stakeholder meeting. So they actually initiated the conversation about how can we solve this. The state fair has always planned, because the dirt condition of the lots is not very pleasurable or conducive to parking during all seasons. They've wanted to be able to use this land, say during the Exarban Livestock Show for staging their trucks and trailers, and actually couldn't last year after the city had given them permission because it had rained and they weren't able to take those heavy trailers onto the dirt without being concerned about being able to get them back out. So they have opportunities where they want to use it and would like to see it paved for their own benefit. The populace study that the city participated in with the state fair only shows parking in this area. Expansion of their livestock buildings, any other additional fair buildings are actually all planned on the Fonner Park side of State Fair Boulevard, the south side. No buildings have been proposed in any of the planning documents that we've seen. The State Fair always simply, with the ARPA money they had, they planned to do stormwater and drainage improvements and create drive lanes that had pervious pavement in order to use the State Fair or the ARPA money in order to make it a better parking lot. So they were actually quite supportive of paving this.
And Fonner was obviously a part of your meetings
Yes.
there for this.
And Fonner has agreed to pay for it. The lease provides that the city doesn't pay anything, not just for the original construction, but Fonner will pay for all of the maintenance, including the annual parking lot striping. Fonner is taking full responsibility for the ongoing maintenance for the next 50 years.
And I guess the question on hand isn't, I guess, whether we like this or not. It's, do we wait longer to do it? I don't know what we gain if you've gotten that conversation from those folks. I don't know what we would bring anybody else to say that's not that. And I appreciate hearing that that's what Jamie had said, Jamie Parr had said. So I think Jay brought up a lot of good points, but if we've talked to everybody and that's what everybody involved agrees with, I don't see what we gain by pulling this back.
The longest delay during the discussions, we've been working with the parties, and Olson Engineering has been working on the design maybe about 6 months. But the longest delay during the process was making sure we satisfied the council's prior commitment to preserve land for the memorial, and working with IAFF and making sure that they approved the plans. Olson actually gave them 2 alternatives, and this is the one that IAFF chose. And it's still allowed for the 1,100 parking stalls. So it worked for everyone.
So we've been working on this for 6 months.
Has it been that long? No, Keith's shaking his head no.
I don't recall exactly when this all started, but I think that they proposed us a couple different variations, like Laura mentioned, probably 6 weeks ago, maybe-ish,
But
is
the
when I first saw this
Okay.
and a different layout.
But you've been having conversations about this
Yeah,
for
the
6 months?
conversations
Yeah, the
at the campus
conversations might have been.
stakeholder meeting started about 6 months ago. It was warm out, it was fall, so,
Earlier today?
yeah, right?
Okay.
Mr. Pollock?
I hear a lot of good arguments, but the bottom line is, how much is this going to cost us because it's a lease? And we're leasing it from Fonner, so Fonner can pay for it. So basically, it sounds like it's coming out of the city's pocket. I don't mean any insult or anything by that, but I would like to see a letter of support from the people that are going to use it, because the state fair is going to benefit. There's 4 or 5 groups that are going to benefit, but they're not going to be paying anything.
So just to clarify, it is a lease from the city to Fonner Park, and it requires Fonner Park to pay 100% of the cost of construction and 100% of the cost of maintenance for the 50-year lease.
Is that going to be possible?
They're obligated to do it.
That's
And-
why I would like to see, a letter of support from these people. I've got your word, which is good to me, but I don't hear anything from the outside entities. They're quiet, and you're right. I think we've been talking about this for maybe more than 6 months.
So Fonner Park has agreed to the terms of this lease. And Elite Casinos attorneys have reviewed this lease as well. Since the state fair isn't a party, we didn't involve them in the actual terms of the lease. They will just benefit from the improvements. But if I hear you right, you would like a letter of support from the state fair?
And the casino.
Okay.
And also, we may be building it for the casino, but this is a state fair parking lot. You can see that every day it's open out there. It's full of people going to the state fair. I do not know what the problem is or the holdup if we wait till March 24th to approve this. That's 4 weeks, and you said they're not going to have it done until before the
No, I don't know when they will have it done. I do know that they had planned to open by the end of first quarter, which would be the end of March.
That's
They-
the casino.
they-
I'm talking about building the parking lot. You said they weren't going to get it done until 26.
Yes, but the casino will not be allowed to open.
If we say on the 24th of March, yes, everything will be hunky-dory. Correct?
Yes, after that, if the council approves it on the 24th, then they would still be able, assuming they'd met all their other construction requirements, they'd still be able to open with the temporary occupancy permit.
And I agree with Mark. I think the casino and Fonner and everybody else needs to think about building a parking garage out there. Because we're going to have this plugged up during State Fair when the casino's trying to run. It's going to be a total nightmare.
So current city code, and this is what the parking official or the building official, Ed Klimek, explained to Fonner and to the casino. Current city code allows, because of the State Fair, it allows for entities that occupy the Fonner Park campus to provide off-site parking for periods of up to 15 days at a time, I believe 4 times a year. And so during the State Fair, this parking lot would be available to State Fair patrons only, and the casino will have to run a shuttle from a remote parking lot. My understanding is they've worked with Fonner to arrange where that would be. So we don't, because we're not involved in that, that's just a condition, that's something that's allowed in city code.
I think they're sitting around wringing their hands wondering what we're going to do, is what I think. But, you know, if they can't open their casino up without the parking lots, I would have thought that they would have known this years ago. Just my opinion. Thank you.
Mr. Hossie?
Yeah, I support the motion to look at it a little bit longer, because it looks to me like it's hard to digest all of the information that's been presented, and even some was in the packet, additional have been provided by staff. It's hard to digest it all, and this is because the effects is a 50-year lease. That's a long time. And so I think that when Mr. Vavricek spoke, I think he brought up some points that I frankly would like to hear from the stakeholders. I'd like them to attend so that questions could be asked. I feel like I'm looking at half of a ball and I don't know what the other half looks like. I can try to imagine it in my head, but I don't know what it looks like, and I'm asked to make a 50-year commitment, and I don't know that I could right now without some additional information from the stakeholders, just to, because I'm not seeing the whole picture. I'm seeing a very narrow part of it, or maybe a big part of it, but I'm not seeing the whole picture, and that's where I would like to, I think the stakeholders would provide some comfort for the council that this is the right thing to do for the right reason and for the 50 years.
Mr. Nickerson?
One thing is I'm wondering why we don't have other members here, and I would think that because it was put on a consent agenda, all the other stakeholders were perfectly okay with it. So that's probably why they're not here. The other thing that I'm wondering, though, we talk about a 50-year lease. What's significant about 50 years? Why would it be so big? Is that just kind of boilerplate for a lot of leases like this? Or just kind of curious, what if it changed to 25 years to give a little flexibility if something were to change? Just a question.
The 50 years was based on the cost that Fonner will be spending to construct it and being able to spread that cost out, I guess, over the life of it. I'm not sure how they are paying for it, but they are paying for it. And then it was essentially on what's the useful life of a parking lot, a concrete parking lot with stormwater improvements.
Okay, just curious. But I would just, when we're wondering where all the stakeholders are, again, they were all at the table. They all came to this agreement, said we're on board with it. So that may be why they're not here tonight. I don't think we're going to gain anything. I'm just going to vote no, simply because I don't think we're going to gain anything. But if the rest of the council feels there's substantial information that we're going to gain, that's okay. But I just think it's going to be 4 weeks of postponement for no reason at all.
Mr. Lanfear?
Would you clarify exactly what we're going to be voting on? Because I see approving the lease on the.
We are approving to move it to the March 25
25th.
meeting. The motion is to approve to move it to the March 25 meeting. You okay? Okay. Mr. O'Neill?
Just one clarification for Laura. So if this were to be approved, they'd be legally bound to do the improvements, and if they did not, there would be, it would
That
be
would be
voided?
default and the lease would be terminated.
Gotcha. And then the only other question too, so if the lease were to be modified, it had to be agreed upon currently by both the city and by Fonner?
Correct.
Okay. And those are the only two entities that have to agree on that?
Correct.
Okay, so this is a motion to vote on the postponement to the March 25th meeting. Please vote. Motion failed. So now we'll go back to the original motion to approve.
Who didn't vote in the first one? Somebody's didn't vote.
Oh, who didn't? Mark, yours didn't come through.
You want to give her a voice vote?
Yeah.
Nay.
So it fails.
It's 5-5 then?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Nope, it's 6-4.
He said nay.
He said no. Right?
He's
Yeah.
seconded the motion to.
You're against the motion to move it to March? You're saying make the decision now?
He said he was going to support it. If he doesn't, we'll change your mind. But I mean,
Okay, yeah. He's saying
He
he wants to
voted
make
no.
the decision now.
Yep. So it failed. So then we're back to the original motion.
There hasn't been the
Yeah, we need a
motion to
motion for the.
postpone was the original motion.
Yes.
Mr. Lanfear?
I would move that we approve 2025-67, approving the ground lease.
Thank you. Is there a second? Mrs. Mendoza?
And I'll second that.
Thank you. Discussion?
Please vote. Motion adopted.